This hearing will come to order. Welcome to the Budget Subcommittee number 1 on Health and Human Services. Our focus today is on human services. We will have a robust discussion about a number of programs to help Californians in need. CalWorks, CalFresh, we'll discuss immigration issues and child support. With that, we're going to get started on our first issue. I'd like to invite our panelists to come forward on poverty and homelessness in California, state strategies. We'll have Alyssa Anderson from the California Budget and Policy Center, as well as Will Lightbourne, the Director of the Department of Social Services. We welcome you. As always, we ask to have just high-level overview of the issues. We will welcome the participation of the public. We ask you to be very brief and get to the issue so that we can make sure that everyone has an opportunity to be heard. With that, welcome, and we are ready whenever you are.
Great. Thank you very much. I want to thank you for inviting me to speak today. My name is Alyssa Anderson, and I'm a Senior Policy Analyst at the California Budget and Policy Center. And the background information in your agenda, I think, very well documents the fact that millions of people aren't benefiting from California's recent economic gains. I really think this is one of the most significant challenges facing our state. And the key point I want to emphasize for you today is that this is a challenge that state policymakers have the tools to address. And I've provided a handout that outlines some of the key policies that can increase economic security in California. And I'll just touch on a few of those policies to be brief. In large part, increasing economic security in our state requires making sure that people earn more, because most families in poverty that can work do work. One way, of course, to help working people earn more is to maintain a strong state minimum wage. And a proposal to increase the minimum wage, as you know, is currently moving forward. Another way is to make sure that the new California Earned Income Tax Credit is widely used. The Cal EITC is expected to provide an average of about $900 to working families with children, so it'll build on the success of the federal credit. Because the Cal EITC is new, however, and because it's targeted to a very hard-to-reach population, I think it'll be especially critical for California to continue to promote this credit even beyond the end of this tax filing season, and particularly in partnership with community-based organizations and counties who directly serve the workers who are eligible. And my handout covers other ways to boost participation as well. Increasing economic security in California also requires having a strong safety net, both for working families and for people who struggle to find jobs and people who can't work. And I think one of the best ways to strengthen the safety net is to raise CalWorks grants and to end the counterproductive maximum family grant policy. Grants were modestly increased in recent years, but they haven't kept pace with rising housing costs. And the agenda includes our recent analysis that shows that the maximum CalWorks grant for a family of 3 won't even cover rent for low-cost housing. And I'd be happy to talk a bit more about that analysis if you'd like. For families that are subject to the maximum family grant rule, affording the basics like housing is even harder. A family of 3 with a child who's subject to that rule would have to make ends meet with the grant for a family of 2. And that would put a family at about a third of the federal poverty line. The fact is, this policy really does nothing more other than push families deeper into destitution and make it even harder for parents to be able to create a better life for their children. And when families can't afford the rent, they're at much greater risk of becoming homeless. And we've seen an alarming rise in homelessness in Los Angeles County, for example, which is documented in your agenda as well. So in addition to raising grants and ending the maximum family grant policy, we also recommend building on progress made last year, increasing support for the CalWorks Housing Support Program so that it can help more families find stable housing. So why do these policies matter? Research shows that boosting families' incomes can improve children's outcomes. When low-income families earn more, their kids tend to do better in school, they're more likely to graduate from high school, more likely to attend college, and even more likely to work and earn more as adults. And helping families find stable housing in particular could give their kids a shot at a brighter future. Children in poverty who have a stable place to live tend to have better outcomes than kids in poverty who have to move frequently because their parents can't afford the rent. So these policies aren't just about increasing families' economic security, they're about creating a better future for our state's children and really creating a stronger economy for all of us. So to close, I want to emphasize that we think it's really critical to start making these kinds of investments this year because the research shows that the longer families spend in poverty, the more likely their kids are likely to be in poverty as adults. And so really every year spent in poverty seems to matter. I think it's been really encouraging to see that with the growing awareness of the harmful effects of poverty on children, there's been growing interest in tackling this problem. And the main message I want to close with is that this is a problem that can be tackled, and there are concrete steps that can be taken to improve children's life chances. And really, we all stand to benefit when more of our state's children have the opportunity to reach their full potential. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Before we go on, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the presence of our budget chair. Always glad to have you here. Assembly Member Ting. We're always glad to see our committee member, Mr. Chu. And we are also glad to welcome Mr. Obernolte. We are glad to have you here today, sir. With that, Madam Clerk, could we establish the roll, please?
Chair Thurman?
Here.
Ting? Here. Chu?
Here.
Obernolte?
Here.
Harper?
Present.
Great.
Right on time. Always on time. Welcome, Mr. Harper. Let us continue. Mr. Lightbourne, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair Thurman and committee members. Will Lightbourne of the California Department of Social Services. Going to be very brief at this point, as I know we have several panels that follow that go into detail. Key point, as Ms. Anderson pointed out, is that we have a challenging situation of poverty in California, and particularly regrettable because it's side by side with actually quite exceptional affluence. And to some extent, one seems almost to drive the other in our current circumstance. At its extreme edges, for those in poverty, we were also seeing a growth in homelessness that now has a statewide dimension to it. What began as sort of an urban single adult response in the 80s to sort of inner city redevelopment, now through the sort of increases in housing costs and the stagnation of minimum wage, has also now become something that affects low-income families all too frequently. So what do we do? Long term, we have to build the skills and support career pathways that open up the new technology economy and other parts of the modern economy to currently lower income people, particularly communities of color. Medium term, we need to raise the minimum wage, find opportunities to expand housing and mesh land use and market policies to control and maintain affordability of housing. Short term, we need to knit together the income supports, the employment opportunities, tax code opportunities, supportive services to allow today's families with today's children to have stable situations in which all basic needs are met, much as Ms. Anderson was describing. The outcomes for children flow directly from that stability. The panels that follow are going to elaborate in greater program detail on the status of the supports and services, but I just want to set a sort of context framework. As you've seen from the background materials, our target is not just the official federal poverty level standard, but it's also the supplemental poverty measure, which incorporates more of the variable costs that people have to face. The chart that we've distributed displays what is optimally possible under the programs as they exist today and based on the current minimum wage. The main point that I would sort of draw from it is that for those families who are receiving CalWORKs and at the average earnings levels of those who are working, which is sort of the middle columns, it is possible to combine all of the supports, all of the earnings, tax credits, nutrition supports, et cetera, to in fact allow the family to exceed the supplemental poverty measure. But that's the optimal. Even that requires knitting together every possible support effectively throughout the programs. more disturbing fact is that for the families with little or no earnings, which is slightly more than half of the families, they're on the left-hand side of that chart. And therefore, the combined resources available to them through grants and nutrition supports do not have the same effect. They don't achieve bringing families out of poverty. They slightly exceed 50% of the poverty level, which is considered deep poverty. And that's even more exaggerated and worse if there's a family member, a member in the household who is not included in the assistance unit, either because of immigrant status, because of MFG, or because of some other exclusion. Ultimately, the challenge is to add earnings to the households. That's sort of the gold standard of what we need to accomplish. Over the past few years, significant investments have been made to make that possible. Several years ago, the legislature and administration increased, or rather restored, some prior reductions to the earned income disregard, which allows families on assistance with earnings to keep the highest possible proportion of their earnings. The administration and legislature invested in the family stabilization component of the CalWorks program, the goal of which is to address realistically the circumstances of families in an immediate crisis, and rather than assuming they're ready for a welfare to work plan participation, to really focus on barrier removal. Significant investment in subsidized employment to allow those participants with limited workforce engagement experience to enter the labor market with assistance from combining both earnings and assistance. And then the housing support program that Ms. Anderson mentioned a moment ago, which seeks to address family homelessness through rapid rehousing. Deploying these effectively and timely is going to help greatly. Then, additionally, last year, the state earned income tax credit was added, and that is, as you can see from the chart, one of the critical dimensions that make it possible for a CalWorks family household with earnings to actually exceed the supplemental poverty measure. And then the proposed minimum wage increases, which have not been calculated into that display, and not until adopted, will further sort of boost the earning power for those who, in fact, have earnings. So as you go through the rest of the agenda, you're going to have a chance to explore in detail many of the components of this program. But I want to, again, thank you for the Assembly's interest, the subcommittee's interest, and answer any questions you have at this point, or else wait until we go into the deep programs.
Thank you, Mr. Lightbourne. Any questions from the committee? Thank you both for laying out the needs that many Californians continue to experience. We're very proud of the work that this subcommittee has done on issues that you've laid out, like the earned income tax credit. We're very proud of that this House has supported that measure, and that this House stands prepared to increase the minimum wage as soon as tomorrow. We are encouraged, but we've heard you in saying that there is more that needs to be done. And so we welcome your participation in the conversation. Let me recognize Assemblymember Chu.
Just make a brief comment that certainly I think many of us have been stunned by these continuing numbers and I think are very committed to finding solutions and finding resources, certainly around homelessness. As a chair of the Assembly Housing Committee, I want to say particularly to our audience who's here, there are many members of our caucus that are looking at a variety of different solutions around homelessness. It is my hope in the next couple of weeks and months between this subcommittee, our subcommittee number 4 of the Budget Committee, and the Housing Committee, will have a robust discussion in the Assembly around new and different ideas that we can move forward to make serious investments in this area. And I'm hoping between our two houses that we can really make a mark in 2016. But we look forward to continuing to gain from your expertise as well as the expertise of all of the advocates in the room.
Thank you. We're going to move to issue number 2. Thank you, Ms. Anderson, and thank you, Mr. Lightbourne, for your testimony. And we'd like to ask Mr. Lightbourne if he'd stay and others to join us. The issue number 2 is CalWorks program and budget overview, sufficiency of grants, and the maximum family grant policy. I want to welcome Mr. Lightbourne again, Jessica Bartholow from the Western Center on Law and Poverty, Frank Mecca from the County Welfare Directors Association of California, Kevin Aslanian from the Coalition of Welfare Rights Organizations. We will have representatives from Finance and the LAO's office, and of course public comment. As our witnesses are prepared to testify today, I just want to lay out what the committee is going to be discussing today, and I want to lay out action that this committee will be taking to repeal the maximum family grant rule. It is the recommendation of our staff and of this chair that we take that action today, and we will do so in a way that I'll describe. But first, I just want to say how exciting it is to me that we can take this action, because we know that the maximum family grant rule has meant mistreatment to families who are in the deepest sectors of poverty, and that it simply says it's a limit, and that no matter how your family expands, and if you're already in poverty, you won't get any additional assistance to help you with those needs. As somebody who basically grew up on the food stamp program and was in a household where we just never had enough, even with the support, we just want to get away from the kind of draconian thinking that has gone into these kinds of restrictions. The mean-spirited, stereotypical, awful comments that were made against public assistance and welfare programs, and the devastation that they've helped to create. This is our opportunity to move forward from that. We should be focused on getting people real help rather than really making attacks on those who are in deep poverty. We should be looking for ways to help people get their way out of poverty, to be able to have some modest savings to help you, prepare for a difficult time, to be able to have real help with child care, to get access to a job, to education, and of course, doing everything we can to improve our wages. Our action today is a first step in helping people get out of poverty and move towards self-sufficiency and making their contribution towards society. In a few moments, we'll take a motion to repeal the maximum family grant, but I want to give the members of the committee an opportunity if they wish to have any opening remarks about the action that this committee is about to take. Mr. Chu.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, I want to thank all the advocates who have been wonderfully persistent in moving forward on this issue. California, we are experiencing a tale of two states at this moment, those who are succeeding and those who definitely are not. And we've heard the statistics that were laid out by Mr. Lightbourne and the previous panel around about a quarter of our children living in poverty, which is unacceptable. The highest poverty rate in the country when you include housing costs, which is unacceptable. And I want to echo our chairman that this is a historic vote. I do hope that this is a year where we eliminate this so-called rule. I was a Senate budget aide in my 20s in 1996, and I was on the Senate floor when Congress passed the so-called welfare reform bill. That was a dark day for working families. I will remember that day for my entire life. And to have an opportunity to cast a vote to finally get this behind us, I think it's special if we can do it right. So look forward to supporting this and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chu. Chairman Ting.
I was just going to thank Mr. Thurman, Mr. Chu, your leadership on this issue for the subcommittee, our budget staff. I know for a number of years we have looked for an opportunity to repeal this. I'm proud to say that we finally found a mechanism with which to do that, but even more proud to say that we have been signaling to families that it's not a crime to be poor in California. And unfortunately, that's what we've been telling folks. And I think that we and the Democratic caucus very much want to signal a different approach to families that need help, need our assistance, that we are not going to penalize them for being poor. And I think that, in fact, this is an issue that we need to talk about and address more within the work that we're doing in this subcommittee, as well as in all the various committees around the legislature. So it's an honor for me to be here, honor for me to be part of this day and part of this vote. So thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Ting. Our staff has worked hard to identify a way to repeal the maximum family grant rule. It involves using funds from the Child Poverty and Family Supplemental Support subaccount, which would give us the ability, with some modest support from the general fund, to take this action today. And we'll talk about that in more detail. But I want to thank our staff for their hard work. I want to thank our chairman for their incredible work, and as others have done, thank the advocates who have been working hard to help make this day happen. While she's not here, I also want to thank a former Assembly member and a former chair of this subcommittee who has made this an issue of priority throughout the entire legislature, and that is Senator Holly Mitchell. I believe that she's somewhere watching, and she is aware of the action that we're taking, and want to thank her and acknowledge her for her incredible leadership on this issue. And so what I'm asking for is a motion to repeal the maximum family grant rule with the adoption of placeholder trailer bill language to accomplish this, and to provide a 4% increase to the CalWorks maximum aid payment, all effective January 1, 2017. Is there such a motion? And a second? Is there any discussion? Let's start with Mr. Obalnote, if you'd like to have some remarks, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question of process. It seems like we're talking about policy here, and it might be more appropriate to have this go through the policy committee and then to appropriations, have the money appropriated through the normal legislative process instead of going through budget.
Thank you, Mr. Obalnote. I don't know if that was your offering to introduce the bill, to have the conversation on policy. We'd be happy to list you as a primary author on such legislation. It is within the guidelines of a budget subcommittee to take these types of actions and to make recommendations that ultimately have to go to the entire Assembly, to leadership, and to the Senate, and ultimately the governor, to take place. And we welcome you here anytime and your thoughts. We are prepared to take action on this motion unless there's any additional discussion on the motion. Madam Clerk, if you'd call the roll on the item.
Chair Thurman.
Aye.
Ting. Aye. Chu.
Aye.
Obernolte.
No.
Harper has 3.
That motion passes. Congratulations, and thank you for your commitment to passing the maximum family grant rule. We don't usually do that, but if you wish to, you may applaud. You may applaud. The sergeant's going to get you for clapping in here, right? They don't like it, but sometimes you have to dispense with some of your practices, because this is something to be celebrated for Californians who have struggled and continue to struggle for a long time. And we thank you all for the great work that you've done. We will take public comment on this issue, but first we want to have some framing about some of the programs that we have been discussing. And with that, we'll turn it over to Mr. Lightbourne to take it from here.
Thank you. And I, in turn, am going to turn it over to Todd Bland, our Deputy Director for Welfare to Work Services.
Good afternoon. I'm Todd Bland, Deputy Director at CDSS for the Welfare to Work Division. Pleasure to be with you this afternoon. Your staff agenda does a really good job of providing an overview of the CalWorks program, so my remarks will be brief, but I'll provide you a short overview. CalWorks is California's version of the Federal Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program. The program currently serves about 500,000 families with 1 million children. The budget for the program that is before you is about $5.3 billion from multiple fund sources. That is a budget that essentially represents current law commitments. It is it just funds our best estimates of the caseload. With respect to federal funding for this program, federal funding comes in the form of a block grant, and that block grant is conditioned on many different things technically, but the one that is of the most attention to the states is what's called the work participation requirement, where under federal law we are required to have 50% of our caseload working either 20, 30, or 35 hours per week, depending on family size and composition and age of the children. California had difficulty meeting that standard from 2008 through 2013 and was found to be non-compliant, and penalties associated with that were tentatively assessed against California. California entered into corrective compliance plans to correct that situation. We have individual plans are already submitted for 2008 all the way through 2013. The plan for 2015 the year that's actually now in the rearview mirror, we said we would get into compliance. We would reach the 50%, and if we did so, we would be able to set aside the penalties for 8, 9, and 10. And I want to take a moment and commend our clients who went to work and were able to engage with the program or go into accountable barrier or education activities. I want to commend our counties who worked on that effort, and I want to commend our staff. We were able to increase our work participation rate from the mid-20s up to, against preliminary data, but that has gone through the Administration for Children and Families, of 55%. I really, really want to commend all the partners who worked so hard to do that, taking substantial federal penalties off the books. We won't have official word on that for a couple more years, but because of that, we have those resources to use as the legislature and the governor sees fit to best serve our families rather than have to make up for a loss in federal funds. In recent years, the program has had several changes that we've made, and we'll get into more details, I think, somewhat later in the agenda. We created the flexible 24-month clock to allow clients to focus on barrier removal and bring everything the program has to bear in terms of flexibility and barrier removal for that time period. We basically ignore those federal requirements. We work on what the clients need, what makes the most sense under CalWORKs. At the end of those 2 years, they then need to meet the federal requirement. We also added important enhancements around the topic of early engagement and best engaging our clients, and those include enhanced subsidized employment, the online CalWORKs appraisal tool, and the family stabilization program. We've also added the housing program. I think we're going to turn to these later in the agenda. Those are my overview thoughts if you have any questions.
Any questions from committee members? Please continue.
With respect to the agenda asked for some thoughts on the grants, I think your previous witnesses and the discussion, I'll just re-summarize some of those thoughts. Indeed, over the past decade, a combination of grant reductions, actions taken by the governor and the legislature and prior administration, followed by, and the impact of inflation has eroded the value of the grant considerably. And that has only partially been restored through more recent actions to increase grants and slight adjustments in the food benefit that does sort of have a federal COLA that goes with it. But in real terms, the grant is clearly worth less now than it was a decade ago. As I think Mr. Lightbourne talked about, and from our chart, one of the best ways to get families out of poverty is if they can remediate their barriers and they can obtain employment. And with the minimum wage increase, they may be able to move further along the chart to the bars to the right side, where indeed a family would be above poverty. But we recognize that's not the story for the majority. Over half the caseload has little or no income, and they sit on the left side of the chart below the poverty line. Whether to increase grants or take other actions, those are budget priorities discussions for the governor and the legislature.
Thank you. So, Lightbourne, anything else from? Thank you, Ms. Bartholomew.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Congratulations for the action you just took. I just would like to briefly make a statement with regards to the repeal of the maximum family grant. I want to thank the committee staff that has worked really diligently to find a response to prior critiques, the only remaining critique really of the program, maximum family grant repeal, and also to thank the committee staff for putting together in the agenda on page 20, I believe, the list of nearly 70 organizations in support, a very broad and diverse group of organizations across the state who support the repeal of the maximum family grant because of its insult to the poorest infants and children in our state, because of the insults to the family privacy that the rule has, and the insult to us as a group of people in California who really believe that everybody should have the same chance at opportunity and success. And we shouldn't degrade that from their first breath. The maximum family grant rule does that. And so today, I know there will be some people in support. I encourage you to look through the list and see its diversity. Perhaps change your vote with regards to this repeal. It has received bipartisan support in the Senate and in the Assembly. And I believe that this is something that everybody should be supportive of. I thank you greatly and look forward to working and fighting with you to get it down to the governor's office and get a signature on this repeal. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bartholomew. Ms. Tremecca.